Good morning, everyone. How are you doing today? I am dry because I'm in the house. If I was outside, I would be soaking wet because it's raining again here in Little Smoky. Yes, it's just getting a little bit much, but you know what? The upside of that is that we don't have any forest fires, so we'll be thankful for that part of it. And we'll just live with the rain because there's nothing really else that we can do. So we're going to do some fun things instead, like how about a decadent seafood lasagna? What do you think of that? That's what we're going to do this morning. And I am going to give you a warning ahead of time that it's been a while since I made this recipe. I don't make it very often because it has a lot of cream and fat in it, and it's not the healthiest thing to be eating on a regular basis. So this is a special dish that I would make probably once, maybe twice a year. That's about how much I would make this. And it's compounded by the fact that seafood over here in landlocked Alberta is not super readily available at a reasonable price. It's definitely a little bit more pricey, so this is something that you would want to make for a special occasion for your family or friends. And I will make some suggestions as we go along as ways that you can cut back the costs a little bit on when you're doing it. But that's totally and completely up to you how you would like to make it and the type of seafood that you want to put into it. So I'm just going to give you the basic recipe, and then you can make adjustments to that as you go when you're making your seafood lasagna. So a number of people out there make it very white. So when you see a seafood lasagna, you will see something that is very, very, it's very white. They use white pepper in it. They don't put anything green in it. All of the ingredients tend to be very pale and creamy and white, and that's exactly how they intended it to be. I find that type of seafood lasagna is, to me, a little bit bland. I prefer to have my seafood lasagna with a little bit more color, and it just looks prettier, I think. And I like the flavors that some of those other things that are a color are bringing to that. So my seafood lasagna is not going to be super white. It's going to be very much more with color in it. So if you see me adding those things and you've seen recipes or had it before and see that it's different, that's the reason why. So welcome to Lori and Cheryl and Carol this morning. It's great to see you here this morning. I just realized that I forgot one of the ingredients, so I'm going to have to buzz over in the middle of it and grab it. Actually, I'm going to do that now before we really get engaged in things, because guaranteed I will forget. So just excuse me for just a second. There we go. We're a little bit better set to go now, I think. Unless I get inspired in the middle of this and say, hey, let's put this in here too. So here we go with seafood lasagna on a Friday morning at 10 a.m. How's that for a challenge? I kind of feel like my brain is just starting to pick up and get working on me. I'm not super much into morning things, so this could be a little bit interesting for sure. So you're going to need to get yourself a pot or two. You're going to have that. I've done some prep ahead of time. Morning, Zachary and Sherry. I've done a little bit of prep ahead of time just for the length of time that we're going to be doing this video, because you do not want to be sitting here for an hour to 2 hours while we're doing this lasagna. So I'm trying to shorten it up a little bit for you. When you're doing it, it'll take you a little bit longer, of course, to do this. So heavy bottom pots are key when you're doing this. And the first thing that we're going to start with is we need to do our seafood. We're going to saute that seafood and the onions and the garlic and some butter and salt and pepper. We're going to do that first, let that saute out. And Lori, ooh, there, the seafood truck's coming to Valley View. So if you're local and you want to check some things out, there's your big chance to do that. Okay, so I've got my pot, and into the pot I'm going to put about, I don't know, half a cup of butter. It really depends on how much seafood you have. I have a fair amount of it because I'm kind of doubling this recipe that I'm making, and I'll explain to you why I'm doing that. So I'm going to turn this burner on to, we don't need it to be super hot. We're going to put it at about a medium. If you have a gas stove, you are going to find that your heat is going to be more instant, and it's going to change kind of how you do things. I don't have a gas stove. Truth be told, I'm a little freaked out by the flame, and anytime you have fat, so I just have a regular glass top cooking stove with a convection oven, and I just make my adjustments as I go, kind of thing. So when I watch all the cooking shows on Facebook or on YouTube, and they all have these gas stoves, and I see these instant heat and how they can get it very refined, there's definitely benefits to it. It's just that I'm a little bit freaked out by those things, so I just go with this regular old stove and go from there. So, morning, Vicki. I know that you cook seafood, so you probably have done this and done a fantastic job at it. Okay, so I've got some butter melting here in the pot, in this big heavy bottom pot. And my apologies for not letting you see in the pot, because my my videography is stable in one spot. I don't have somebody behind the camera so they can raise it up so you can see in the pot. So I will do my best to show you what's in the pot. If you would like to see something specific, I will also do my best to read the comments that are coming to me on the camera, and we'll try to get this thing figured out and do it together in a helpful manner for you, should you choose at a future date to make seafood lasagna. So the butter is melting in the pot here, and then I have it at about a medium, about 5-6-ish kind of heat, right around there. The reason I haven't turned it up higher, I could, but I haven't turned it up higher, is that I don't want to burn the butter. Now, there's a couple schools of thought on that. You can use a canola oil or olive oil in your pot when you're sauteing your seafood, but I really love the flavor that you get from butter. So I just choose to do it a little bit slower and go for the flavor instead. So you can choose. Some people do a combination of the two also. So go with the butter with the flavor, and then they use the canola oil or olive oil for that ability to be able to put your heat up just a little bit more and get that that nice sauteing thing happening with your seafood and your onions and your garlic. So, and again, you're going to adjust your recipe for how you like it. So I have got in here probably about 2 medium onions that I have chopped ahead of time, and I'm going to put that into my pot, and I'm going to bang nice and loud for you here. And I have a Ukrainian background, and some people are a little averse to onions and garlic, but I love it. I love the flavor that comes from it, so I'm not afraid to use a decent amount of it. And seafood is quite, it's quite a heavier flavor. It's very fishy, so if you're not into fish and those sorts of things, you will find it very much like that. So I find that it can take the garlic and the onions quite well. And I also don't like a bland seafood lasagna. That's not for me either. So I put in a fair amount of onion. You can adjust accordingly from a half of a medium all the way up to 2 mediums or 2 large. You make your decision, decide what you want to do with that. Okay, so we're going to start with that first. And I'm going to put a little bit of salt in those onions. And I'm also going to put in some pepper. If I can get my pepper thing open. I'm going to put a little bit of pepper in that and get those onions sauteing. I'm not putting the garlic in right instantly because garlic can burn. So it cooks quite a bit faster. I mean, it's chopped smaller too, but it can cook way faster than the onions. You need those onions to sweat out nice. And the garlic would just get overcooked too fast. And overcooked garlic will get bitter on you. So you have to kind of decide how you want to do that whole thing. Whether you want to have bitter garlic or maybe you don't even want to put it in. But I like it, so that I'm going to use that. And I'm going to step out of camera view every few seconds because I'm going to dump my dishes in the sink. So you're going to hear a loud clatter. There we go. So, got a spoon, and we're going to mix up this butter in with these onions. And adjust your butter accordingly to how many onions you have put into the pot. I put about between a quarter and a half a cup of butter in there because I've got a fair amount of onions that went into my pot because I've got a pretty good chunk of seafood that I'm putting in here. So this recipe is going to pretty much be double what you would make for just a regular lasagna pan. And the reason I'm doing that is because the leftover sauce can be frozen and you can serve that over pasta. So you have that in your freezer. You need a quick meal when you come home. Grab out that container of that sauce that you've saved up and you heat that up nice and piping and you can put that over pasta and you've got a super quick meal that you can have that's great and tasty and people will think, oh, she's done all this work, and actually you've done the work previous. Now you're doing it, making use of that sauce that you made previous to when you're eating it then. So that's what you can do. And that's what my plan is, to do that. Unless I get inspired to make a second lasagna and put that into the freezer, and then I'll have one for backup for later. So make a choice on that as to what you want to put in there. Your other thing that you're going to make some decisions on is what kind of seafood you're going to put into your seafood lasagna. Morning, Sabrina. You get to decide what kind of seafood you're going to include. Now, my go-tos fairly regularly are shrimp, because I can get them at not too great of a cost. I get them at Costco. And if I watch them, they'll even come on sale. So I get the shrimp. And I buy the smaller ones. I don't need to have really big, huge ones. If you buy the really big ones, then you need to cut them down usually, because you don't want that big of a hunk of seafood. When you're trying to slice up your lasagna, it makes it a little bit more difficult. So I buy the smaller ones, and then I don't have to cut them or deal with that, when I'm cutting my lasagna. So shrimp, that usually goes into my seafood lasagna. And canned crab is another thing that I will put in mine if I can't access the frozen seafood, either from Costco or my local grocery store, whichever one. I will put in canned crab. I've done that lots in the past. And I wait till that comes on sale too, so I can make it a little bit more reasonably priced. Now, if you live by the coast or somewhere where you can easily get seafood and it's great, and you want to buy the crab in the claws and you want to take it out and do all that kind of glorious stuff, yabber. You can put lobster in, but I find that lobster is so fabulous you'd want to eat it by itself instead of putting it into lasagna, so I don't put that in there. Scallops, those I put in fairly regularly too, unless I can't access them. Pardon my banging. But I put scallops in. And then the other thing that I do that kind of makes the sauce extend a little bit and brings the cost down a tiny bit, and you could simply go with that right straight across the board, and just do all fish, is I add a fish. Sometimes it's halibut, sometimes it's cod. It just depends on what I see in Costco, because that's usually where I would pick it up from. Or if it's on sale in my local grocery store, which happens every once in a while too. So you don't want the breaded stuff. Morning, Joylyn. I'm Sandy. Hi. You don't want the breaded stuff. You want just the plain fillets of fish. And cod actually works quite decently, and so does halibut. I've also done salmon, but not as often, because I found the salmon flakes out pretty fast, and it's probably, then you end up with kind of mushy rather than chunks. So my onions are cooked in my garlic, and now I've got this bowl here of scallops, shrimp, and cod. I think that's what I put in here, cod. And I'm going to dump that. Try to do it carefully. My bowl is bigger than my pot here. And I bought these frozen. So they're going in. You can probably hear the clanging, and that's because it's frozen. So it's going to take a little bit of a minute for that to cook down. I'm going to wash my hands, excuse me. All right. And at this point, you can add a little bit of a couple of things. You can add in some water into this, or you can add clam juice. If you've used canned crab, you can just put all the liquid in there too, because you're going to need to have a little bit of liquid added to this. I am not adding mine right at this instant because I think that with my frozen seafood that I put in here, I'm going to get a decent amount of liquid, and so I'm not going to really worry too much about adding liquid to it. And my fish is starting to thaw a little bit, so it's not quite so frozen. If it's more frozen, morning Karen, if it's a little bit more frozen, then adding that liquid will help to kind of break it down a little bit faster. So you can make your choice. And also, people have put in vegetable stock. They put in chicken stock in theirs. So make your choice as to how you want it. If you like it to have more of a seafood flavor, definitely use the clam juice or use the canned crab juice, like that juice that's in the can from your crab. You can pop that into that just to give you some liquid base while you're getting that seafood cooked up. It cooks up decently fast. It doesn't take a super long time to get that cooked up. I still have my burner set at about 6. I haven't set it any higher than that because I don't want this to burn. Being a little bit more careful because I've just put a fair chunk of change into this seafood and I really don't want to have it wrecked. And so I am trying to be a little bit more careful with what I put in there. So I'm noticing the shrimp already is starting to turn pink. It's hit that heat, so it's cooking up decently fast. And the fish that I put in there, you can see that already starting to turn more white too as it cooks in this hot butter and onions that I've got here in this pot. So I have probably got in here, I probably got about 5 to 6 pounds of seafood in here. That's kind of what my guess is. Probably about 5-ish. Yeah, at least 5 pounds of seafood in here. And that can be whatever variety it is that you choose to put into your lasagna. So like I said before, it can be some shrimp, some scallops, some fish, put some salmon in there if you want to. You could put crab in there. I skip the lobster because I like to just eat it just straight up like that. Maybe with the steak on the side. Yeah, so a variety of seafood that you want to put in there. You can also put clams in there. I didn't like the texture of clams when I made it. I didn't like the texture of the clams with that cream sauce and the lasagna noodles. And then I would hit one of those little clams and I didn't particularly love it. I think it belongs in clam chowder. So I have not put clams in mine. But if you love clams, then you should definitely put some in there. I've also done some squid. And because it was on sale, that's why I put it in there. And I did chop that up because it's a seafood that it's definitely not super tender, so you want to have big hunks of it in there. You put little smaller bits in there, get a little bit of a different texture kind of happening, so you can do that too. So make your choices to what kind of seafood you want to put in there. And like I said before, this is a little bit bigger of a recipe, so that I can make a bigger pan of lasagna, or I can make a smaller one and then save some sauce to put on pasta later, or a second lasagna. Haven't quite decided what I'm going to do, but I figured if I'm doing all the work of all this, then I might as well go for it and go big. Go big or go home. There we go. That's what I'm going to say. Go big or go home. Alrighty. So I don't see any questions yet. We stuck to pretty basic things. So I hope everyone's gardens are doing well. Mine is doing okay. What I have of a garden. My flowers aren't the happiest, and I think it's just because they've had so much moisture. And my tomatoes and peppers are not, they're blooming, but they're not producing any fruit. I think it's a little early for my peppers because I don't have them in the greenhouse. But my tomatoes are not happy because they need way more heat than what they currently have. So the tomatoes are doing pretty much nothing. Now my carrots are growing good, and my beans are about to bloom. And even though I planted a fairly short little row because I'd have it in a kind of a raised bed garden thing, I am going to have, I think, a pile of beans. And that's going to be interesting because Audrey's going to be telling me, you should come over here and eat some of these beans. There's too many beans for us to eat. So I think she's going to be freezing them, or she's going to be making pickles, because I will have a few of my own beans. Now, there were seeds in her. I won't eat that, but yeah. Hopefully your gardens are doing good, Zachary. Yeah, Logan's going to be eating seafood lasagna. Well, you know what? I might have to try to bribe him because he is not too gung-ho to come home and visit anymore. He has a life. Who would imagine? 24-year-old adult son has a life. But I might be able to, you know, bribe him a little bit with the seafood lasagna. He might get some leftovers in a container. We'll put it that way. Okay, so the shrimp is pinking up nicely. It's taking a little bit longer because I put it in frozen. And if you're buying frozen, I mean, they suggest that you cook it from a frozen state anyway, so it's all good. It just takes a little bit longer to get that cooked up. And as soon as this is cooked up, and I'm getting a fair amount of juice in here, which is a good thing, because I want that juice. That's going to be the flavor for the rest of the sauce that we're going to make up as soon as these shrimp are cooked down. The scallops. Scallops are taking probably the longest because they're the most solid. So to give them a minute to get doing their thing. So when you're making this, while you're waiting for this to kind of do its thing, you can kind of prep your ingredients for the next stage. And that will be to get yourself some flour, and you'll need some butter. You'll need a little bit of nutmeg, some parsley, and some lemon juice. And you're also going to need some grated Parmesan cheese. And I recommend that you buy the block of Parmesan, whichever variety you like of that, like that hard cheese. Buy whatever variety you like, but buy it in the block. And morning, Joyce and Laura, all the way down from Seattle area. Now, this lady has got access to seafood down there. And then you're going to grate it. You're going to grate your own Parmesan, because the Parmesan that you buy in the container already pre-grated has had things added to it so that it will not clump together and will last a longer amount of time. And it does not like to melt. And you want to be able to melt that Parmesan into your bechamel sauce that we're going to make. As soon as we get the seafood a little bit more cooked here. It's not quite cooked enough. I'm actually going to turn the heat up just a tad here. I think I can talk and make sure it doesn't burn while I'm doing my talking. Okay, so you're going to buy the block of Parmesan, and you're going to grate your own Parmesan, because we want the best melting for that cheese to go into your bechamel sauce. So I've used a word that some of you may not know what it is, and so I thought I'll talk about bechamel sauce. So it's based out of French cuisine, And they have these 5 sauces that beginner chefs are supposed to be able to make. And bechamel is one of them. I think hollandaise is another. And there's a tomato one. And there's 5 of them. I don't know what they all are. Obviously, I have not mastered them. And I probably have not even made them all. But bechamel is a white sauce. And it's super simple. It sounds really high and mighty, uppity and complicated and all those kind of things. But it actually is fairly simple. So, bechamel sauce. Butter, equal amounts of butter and flour. You put your butter in your heavy saucepan. You melt that down. Then you add in your flour, equal amounts of flour. So if you have a 1/2 cup of butter, you add 1/2 cup of flour. And to that, I think the base recipe for that is 1/2 cup of butter, 1/2 cup of flour, and 1.5 cups of milk. Whole milk will give you the deepest flavor of bechamel sauce. And then you are going to add to that a little bit of salt. And I don't think you put pepper in it, if I remember correctly. There's no pepper in it because it's quite white. Unless you wanted to sneak in white pepper, because you want that to be, but you want bechamel sauce is supposed to be quite white. That's the thing. I've made all kinds. And then you add a pinch of nutmeg to that sauce. And you cook that, stir it with a whisk, and you cook that until it is smooth and creamy and white. And that's a base sauce. And then to that, you can add all kinds of things. You can add, you could add seafood to it, you could add chicken to it, and some other seasonings to move that kind of into, if you're going to do like a Southwest, maybe even to Mexico a little bit, things there. Italian, it's just a base for lots of different kinds of things. But it's a white sauce, and it's made with flour and butter and milk. And you add the salt to taste, and you add a little bit of nutmeg to that also. So I like nutmeg in mine. Some people don't particularly care for it, and I like it in my seafood lasagna. It seems kind of weird that I put onions and garlic and then I add nutmeg to it, but it tastes great. I really like it. That's how I make mine. So I am going to give this seafood about maybe 5 more minutes. Maybe 5 more minutes. So I've left this spoon in here. I can because this is a heat resistant spoon that I've got in this pot. And I've got quite a decent amount of liquid in here. So when I add that to my, the seafood and this sauce to my bechamel, it's going to be fabulously seafoody from cooking the seafood down with the butter and the salt and pepper and onions and the garlic. That's what we've done and got here in this pot so far. Okay, so you've got these other ingredients. Now, I put lemon juice in mine too. Some people don't put lemon juice in. They choose to use white wine instead, and you can do that. I looked through my stash of stuff here in my kitchen, and I didn't have any white wine on hand. I had like strawberry rhubarb and raspberry and all kinds of things. And I have Chianti for some reason, which this is not going to be, that's not going to be going into this seafood lasagna. As tasty as it might be, it's for a different recipe. So I don't have any white wine, so I've chosen instead to use lemon juice. And you put the lemon juice in to add a little bit of a tang, and it takes it away from having that kind of a flat kind of a flavor. The lemon juice just adds that little bit of acidity to it, and it's fabulous. So you're going to add some lemon juice. You're going to have that on hand to put in there, and then your block of your Parmesan that you're going to add to the sauce also to get that cheesy, creamy kind of thing happening. Morning, Tamar. And the other thing that you can do, if you like, is you can grate some mozzarella cheese. So when we make this, you'll notice that I don't put mozzarella in between the layers of lasagna. You can do that if you want to. I find that the creaminess of the sauce is already, there's enough richness, and you put cheese in that sauce too, so it's creamy and cheesy enough already. But it's really nice on the top. So about the last 10 minutes of baking, I will pull the lasagna out of the oven. I will put the mozzarella cheese, shredded mozzarella cheese, on the top of it, and then I will bake it for about 10 minutes, 10 more minutes, to get that nice and melty, and it'll start to get a nice little bit of a brown crust on there. It might be more like 15 minutes, depending on how high you're cooking your lasagna. But to get that nice golden cheese layer on the top is lovely. So you're going to do that at the end. If you put it on at the very beginning, when you first make your seafood lasagna, you will find that it is it's going to get too crispy and crunchy and hard, and because of the length of time that you're cooking this lasagna. So I just find that it's better to add in about the last 10-15 minutes of cooking time is the best. That's what I find. So you can grate that and have that ready to go for when you're putting this lasagna together. So I think that I'm going to call this done, this sauce here, and I'm going to turn my heat back down, and I'm going to take this pot with seafood, I'm going to move it over there, and I'm going to, before I put it on the heat, pop some butter in there. So I've got about a cup that I'm putting in here. About a cup. I might need to add a little bit more to that. So I will just do that. There. You want to have equal amounts of butter and flour. Okay, and I'm sorry, Kathy, I couldn't see your question that you posted to me, so I will answer you when I'm done this video. Hope that's okay. So here we go. I'm going to take this spoon out of this pot. I'm going to just use that because it's going in the same thing. And I'm going to melt this butter. Get this nice and sizzly. And I forgot my milk, so I had to go over and get that. There we go. See if I can do this without spilling anything. Ah. That's always a good question. Okay, so we're melting this butter down. Now, the reason you melt the butter down is you need this liquidy, and then you add your flour to it. And you put equal amounts because the flour is the thickening. If you do not have that butter soaked into that flour, it's going to go lumpy. Very good chance that it's going to go lumpy on you. And you don't want that to happen. So you melt your butter and you add your flour, equal amounts, and you stick your elbow in your milk. And that's how you make sure that it doesn't get lumpy on you when you're making this bechamel sauce. Melt your butter, add your flour, equal amounts. And so you can adjust your recipe as needed. Half a cup of butter, half a cup of flour, 1.5 cups of milk, seasoned, a little bit of nutmeg, white pepper, if you wanted to keep it white, although the original recipe doesn't call for pepper. So it depends on what it is that you're making. And salt. You need some salt in there. And there's schools of thought on whether you should use salted or unsalted butter. I just use salted butter. I can't be bothered to switch those around. So if you are preferring unsalted for whatever reason, it's your recipe and your dish. You can do it however you want to do it. All right. So I have melted my butter. Now I am going to add this flour here. So I had about 1.5 cups of butter and about 1.5 cups of flour. I'm going to add that to the mix. And I'm going to keep stirring it because I don't want it to burn. That would be terrible. Okay, and you want to stir it until that flour is completely coated with that butter. So you don't want to have any white in your pot at all. from that flour. You want it to be all squishy from it being in the butter. And then you're going to take your milk and you're going to slowly add it to your sauce, to your flour and water. And you're going to see it's going to start to thicken. And you're going to do it slowly. You need to add it slowly for sure. And you can also use a whisk. I don't have my whisk on me right now, so I'm just going to use a spoon, which will work just fine, until you get that butter and that flour cooking down in your pot. And so it's losing its lumpiness because you've got the milk added to it. And then when that happens, you can pour in the rest of your milk. And you can choose with your milk whether or not you want to use a whole milk or a 2%. I've got a whole milk that I've added in mine because it's seafood lasagna. And I'm figuring if you're going to go for something that's going to taste fantastic, just go for it. I mean, you've already put all this butter into it, and you put butter into the seafood. And then you're going to grate cheese into it and everything. Just go for it and put the stuff in there. Okay, and I'm going to grab a whisk. I don't like that one. I like this one better. I'm going to just take the spoon out for a second and give this a whisk. And I won't leave the whisk sitting in my pot because it's too short. And I don't feel like fishing a whisk out of my sauce this morning. I'm trying to eliminate problems instead of adding problems. And it looks like I have like a crazy too large of a pot going here. But when I add the seafood in and I start mixing, I have found, my experience over the years is that to use a little bit bigger pot is better than to use too small of a pot. And then in the middle of things, trying to figure out, oh my goodness, what do I do? Because I have more product in the pot than I should, and it's going to boil over and make a huge mess, and you're trying to transfer it to pots, and it's not worth it to do that. Okay, so it's already starting to thicken. There's enough heat in there from that flour and butter. I've added that milk to it, that it's starting to thicken, quite lovely like. And that's what you want. You want that to start thickening. So at this point in time, I'm going to carefully set that there, and I'm going to add in some salt. And you're going to do that to taste. And I'm putting black pepper in my lasagna because I'm not worried about it being white. So I'm putting black pepper in, and I can add more later if I want to. And I'm also putting in dried parsley. I would use fresh, but I forgot to plant mine this year. And so guess what? We're having dried parsley. It's going into this pot. And I will stir it in between because it's getting thicker and thicker. So I'm going to add that dried parsley in there. And then I'm going to go into my nutmeg. And I'm going to put in 2 pinches because I made a double batch of sauce here. Okay? All right. I'm getting that whisking thing happening here. And you have to whisk. If you do not whisk, mix that up, guess what? You're going to have lumps. And then I'm going to go over here to my pot, and I'm going to take out a scoop of this broth that I made from the seafood. And actually, I'm going to do 2. And I can smell that seafood scent now that I've put that sauce from the cooking of the fish, the shrimp and the scallops and the fish. And you're going to do some major work on that, and I'm going to add some more. It's getting super thick. and it smells divine. So it is thick enough at this point in time that I can, with this, I am going to dump all of this seafood mix into the sauce because it's pretty much done. So I'm going to dump that in there. Scoop out all the last little bits of goodies in there. I'm going to get rid of this whisk. And I am going to just use a spoon to mix this up. And I can turn my heat off now. And I'm going to add into that into this mix that I've done here, which is about doubled, I'm going to put in about a half a cup of lemon juice into that. And I only know how to do that when I use lemon juice in my water, so I can judge pretty good on that. But you can always add a little bit and have a taste, and if you think it needs more, then you just add more to the mix and get that stirred up. And if your sauce is too thick, so if you didn't get enough juice out of your seafood, feel free to add more milk and make your sauce a little more runny. If you have cooked your noodles al dente and they're going to be soaking up some of the sauce, then you can definitely have it be just a little bit runnier. So this is a little bit thick for me, but that's okay because we didn't have enough fat in here already. We are going to check, make sure cream's good. We've had thunder here lately. And you're going to add 1 to 2 cups of cream to this mix. So I've doubled mine, so I'm going to probably put closer to 2 cups. So I'm going to go 1 and 2. And this is heavy cream. This is 35% whipping cream. All of us good Ukrainians, right, Tamar? We know how to use this stuff. And then you're going to stir that into your mix. And you're going to see your sauce is going to get a little bit runnier, which is good. That's what you want. You're going to make your sauce be just like you would for regular lasagna. So you don't want it super thick. You don't want it super runny. And if you are using the those oven-ready noodles, then you're going to have to be really careful. You might get a dry lasagna if your sauce is not quite a bit runnier, and then you have to let it sit longer and cook differently and all that kind of stuff. So make adjustments for that. I cooked my noodles ahead of time, and that's what I'm going to use for this lasagna. Now, I've added all the ingredients that I think that I need. Now what I have to do is take my spoon and I have to taste my sauce, because here's where you're going to be adding your extra seasoning if you need it. It is pretty much perfect. I might add a little bit more salt. But it is good to go. It's really good. My non-dairy tolerant stomach is going to protest, I'm sure, but the sauce is good to go. So we are now ready for layering, and I've been trying to figure out how I'm going to do this. You know what? I'm just going to move closer to the camera. My apologies. Shove that over to the side, and I'm going to get my pan here. You know what? I'm going to use this ladle because it'll be easier to put that in there. So I have got an extra large pan here. It's not a 9x13. It's a little bit bigger than that. And the key with this is, unless you're going for a thinner seafood lasagna, make sure you go with a deep enough pan, because when this starts to bubble up, you're going to have issues. See, now look at it. I forgot already what I was doing. So what did I forget to do? I forgot that I needed to put in my cheese. Even though I went over to my fridge and I got it after having forgotten it. So hard, get your block of Parmesan or hard cheese. So you can use, if you want it extra cheesy, go ahead and use an Asiago. You can do that too. I've done that in the past and it's delicious. So you can add about a cup to 2 cups depending on the size of your recipe, and you're just going to grate it in to your pot. And you can do this ahead of time. I completely forgot about this, so I'm going to do it now. Let's see if I can do this in such a manner as to speed it up a little bit and not drop the whole thing into the sauce, which I have done before. And you don't want to get your fingers too close to this microplane because it's crazy sharp and it will skin you. It will skin you. Okay, you could leave this cheese out if you wanted to. If you just decide that's enough richness. But there is something about the flavor of that cheese in this lasagna that you just don't want to skip out on. And while I'm doing this, I will tell you that the reason I did this recipe, I mean, I've been trying not to do recipes, these live session recipes that are really complicated and really expensive. Mostly because I know funds are tight. You know, this COVID thing has really kind of wrecked our budgets to bits and such. But this was requested by a friend now who was my math teacher when I was in high school. Wilma, this is for you. I made this lasagna for a Toastmasters event one time, and she had it and she thought it was excellent. She thoroughly enjoyed it, and so she asked, when I said, what recipes would you like to see me make? She asked for this seafood lasagna. So that's why I am doing this seafood lasagna. All right, getting down to the end, so we're going really slow so we don't skin ourselves. Let's give this a little tap. Thank goodness I remembered. Even though it's still, it already tastes pretty amazing, but I've got cheese all over the place. So you're going to stir that cheese into the mix. And I know it's going to taste great, so I'm not going to bother tasting it. Okay, now it's melted in, got lots of heat in it. Okay, let's see if we can get this off this poor spoon. I really should be using a spatula, shouldn't I? Oh well. Okay, so when you're making lasagna or anything that's got noodles like this, then what you want to do is on the bottom of your pan, you want to add a little bit of sauce and coat the bottom of that pan, because it will keep your noodles from sticking to the bottom of the pan. Have that little bit of sauce there. And when the sauce is this fantastic, why would you not want more sauce in your lasagna? Okay. I'm going to do this without burning things and making a total mess. So normally what I do is I cook my noodles and I have them, where am I going to put this? And I have them cooked about the same time as, putting this in here wrong, that my sauce and everything is done. So I would have like 3 pots going at the same time. But I thought that this morning it might be safer for me to not have 3 pots going on the stove at one time. While I'm trying to talk and do this thing. So I did this ahead of time, and then I had to add some oil to my noodles so that they would not all glue together. Okay, so you're going to put a layer of noodles in your pan. And you're going to be really greasy. Excuse me, oh, no, forget it. You know what? I will just make a mess. Because it's my kitchen and I can do it. Okay, now you're going to take your sauce and you're going to pour it on top of that. And you can also add more cheese to the mix if you like. You can put ricotta cheese on this layer. After this layer, you can put ricotta cheese in there. I find that there is plenty enough seafood and cheese and all the other things going on that I do not need to add ricotta to the mix. So I just go with layers of the seafood and of the noodles. Okay, we're going to go for another layer of noodles on this. If you would see me doing this when I have just cooked the noodles, you would see me almost doing a dance because the noodles are so hot coming out of that hot water that I have it sitting in because it's finished. Okay, and one more noodle at the top end there. I could probably just about put 2 noodles there, but oh well, we'll just do one. And we're going to do another layer of sauce. On top of that. You can use a spatula to spread it out. But I'm making do here so I don't get another thing dirty. Okay, so I've got 2 layers of noodles there now. I'm going for a 3rd layer of noodles. And I have not cooked these super well, so they've got a little bit of al dente to them. So they will soak up a bunch of the liquid of this sauce. So if you're looking at your sauce and going, oh, that's just way too liquidy, know that your noodles, if they've been cooked al dente, they are going to soak up some of that liquid that you've got in there. Okay, and one more down here. Actually, I'm going to put 2 more down here because I feel like it. Noodle down here. Oh, and it's so slippery. Okay, so that's 3 layers of noodles so far. And I could probably get a 4th in here, but I'm opting for 1 more layer of sauce. Oh my gracious, I'm getting it everywhere. And guess what I'm doing for the next half hour after I'm done this? Cleaning up. Okay, so I'm going to put that on top of that. And like I said, I could put another layer of noodles on that and have it even thicker, but I'm going to leave it at that because I don't want it to kind of bubble over everywhere. So this will go into the oven like this. I don't know if I'm going to just clean my hands so I can lift this pan without getting it all greasy. I don't know if I can show you this pan. So it looks all creamy and it's a little bit like moves around. Good. Once you bake that, it's going to definitely become more solid. It's definitely going to be more solid once you get that baked. And then about 10 to 15 minutes before it's finished, you're going to bake it for about, I would say 45 minutes. So 30 minutes, then 10 to 15 minutes after that, you're going to put a layer of mozzarella cheese on top of that and then let it finish baking. Pull it out of the oven. You're baking it at 350 degrees. Pull it out of the oven and let it rest for about 15 minutes. That will help it come together a little bit, solidify a little bit more, so it's not quite so sloppy. That's the key with any lasagna. Let it rest for about 15 minutes before you slice it and serve it. It just turns out way better. Whatever the things that happen, I haven't figured out all that stuff or really delved into all the techniques of doing lasagna, but I just know that if you let it sit for about 15 minutes after you take it out of the oven, it slices way better, and it just appears much nicer on your plate when you slice it and you serve it. So I think I've hit all of the highlights for this. So this recipe here that I did, I doubled it. So I did about 5 pounds of seafood. I cooked probably, well, how many layers? 4, 5, 6. 6 times 3 layers, so 18 to 20 pieces of lasagna, the lasagna noodles. So I started out with about 5 pounds of shrimp that I had sauteed with probably one really good big onion and about 2 tablespoons of minced garlic. And I did that in a half a cup of butter. Let that cook so it's nice and sauteed. Then in a different pot, I started out with 1.5 cups of butter. I added 1.5 cups of flour. And then I added about 6 cups of milk and the juice. Once I stirred that all up, get that nice and thick and bubbly, whatever, added my salt and my pepper and my nutmeg to that. Once I've stirred all that up, then I added about 1/2 cup of lemon juice and then 2 cups of whipping cream, heavy cream, to that. Taste that, make sure it was, seasoned fairly decently. Then I added in about 1 to 2 cups of grated Parmesan cheese. Hard block Parmesan, I didn't do it from the container. It just melts much nicer. And then I made 3 layers, starting with sauce, a little bit of sauce in the bottom so the noodles don't stick. 3 layers of noodles and sauce. I'm going to bake that at 350 degrees for about 30 minutes. Depending on the heat in your oven, you can see it nice bubbly or whatever. Then I'm going to put a layer of shredded mozzarella cheese on top of that. Bake it for another 15 minutes. Pull it out of the oven. Let it rest for about 15 minutes. Then I can slice it and I can serve it. You can serve it with garlic toast, a beautiful green salad, some roasted asparagus, or green beans, any vegetables that you want to put with it. It has lots of starches already in there, and you've got lots of seafood. And really, I did about 5 pounds of seafood. You could go for 6 pounds, 7 pounds. Just go for the seafood. Whatever you've got, make it work for you, and I think you'll thoroughly enjoy it. I added parsley to mine and nutmeg, and I put black pepper in mine. Some of the recipes, people that I've had some of the seafood lasagna want it completely white, so they used white pepper, and they don't put no parsley in it. They don't put garlic in it or onions in it, and they wouldn't put any nutmeg either. It would just be really, really white. But I love flavor in my seafood lasagna, so that's why I've added all those things. You could use fresh parsley. I use dry just because I didn't have any fresh stuff here this morning. And salt and pepper is seasoning to your taste, so you decide how much you want in what you're making. So make sure you taste as you're cooking. That's one of the keys to cooking, is taste as you go, understanding that the things that are coming up. So you're adding cheese at the end, it's going to add a little bit more salt. So if it needs just a little bit more salt, just let the cheese do that work and go from there, and just make your adjustments as you go. And I cooked my noodles in salted boiling water. That's how I cooked my lasagna noodles. So there you go, Wilma, and whoever else is interested. Thank you all for joining me here in my kitchen on this Friday morning for seafood lasagna. I hope that you have a chance to make it and you get to serve it to the people that you love, the people in your life who are extra special, because this dish is definitely for the extra special ones that you have in your life. So enjoy. Have a fantastic weekend. I hope you're looking after yourselves, getting to enjoy something beautiful. If it's not the rain, if you're not enjoying the rain, find some flowers or some time with a friend or something to lift your spirits, and then share it with somebody else. Build into somebody else's life some joy and encouragement Yeah, we can't hug each other right now. We're supposed to be keeping our social distance, but if you are blessed enough to have family with you, give them an extra long hug and tell them that you love them and enjoy those moments, because you never know when you're not going to get the next one. So thanks for joining me here this morning in my kitchen for Seafood Lasagna. And I will see you next time in this kitchen when we do butter chicken. I'm doing the butter chicken for Pearl. So Pearl, that's going to be the next thing that we're going to do out of here to this kitchen, will be the butter chicken. And hopefully that will be fun too. It'll be probably just about as crazy as doing this one as I kind of make it up as I go with different things. So you have a general recipe, but kind of make it work from there. So once again, thanks for joining me, and I will see you next time here in my kitchen in Little Smoky.